The first time my sister told my staff, "Family eats free," she said it loud enough for the entire dining room to hear. It was a Friday night service, fully booked, soft jazz under the glassware, candles steady, my pass running hot, and the front room moving with that precise, expensive calm. People pay for when they book a table 3 months out. My restaurant had earned its Michelin star 8 months earlier. Since then, every service felt like performing surgery in silk gloves. One wrong move, one sloppy plate, one loud scene in the dining room, and people remembered the disruption longer than the food. So of course, my family chose a Friday. I saw them the moment I stepped out of the kitchen to check the floor. My mother in a cream coat like she was arriving at a charity gala instead of a restaurant she had once called that little cooking phase. My father already smiling at a server he didn't know. My sister Vanessa with one hand on the host stand, pointing at the reservation book like she owned the building. And behind them, my aunt and her husband drifting in as backup, the way my family always moved when they wanted to make cruelty look democratic. We all decided. That had always been their favorite trick. Not I decided, not your mother decided, not your father decided. We all decided. As if a group lie became truth by sounding unanimous. The hostess looked relieved when she saw me. "Chef," Vanessa didn't even turn. "Tell them to put us at the center table," she said. "And no rush on the tasting menu. Family's here." I stopped beside the stand and said, "No." The word landed cleanly. My mother turned first. For half a second, something mean and satisfied flashed across her face, the look of a woman who had always believed my success was temporary and was finally getting the chance to test it with her bare hands. Then she smiled. "Camille." I hadn't heard my own name in her mouth in almost 2 years, not because we were estranged in some dramatic screaming way. My family preferred colder methods. They withdrew, reappeared, claimed concern, rewrote history. They didn't cut people off. They edited them. Vanessa folded her arms. "We came to celebrate. You came without a reservation. We're family. That is not a reservation." My father chuckled like I was being theatrical. "Don't start, Camille. We all wanted to see the place." The place. At 19, I had still been living under their roof, commuting to culinary school on scholarship, coming home after late prep labs smelling like butter, onions, bleach, and exhaustion. My mother used to stand in the kitchen doorway and say things like, "No serious man wants a wife who comes home smelling like fryer oil," while Vanessa sat at the table in her business law textbooks and soaked up approval like sunlight. Then one night I came home and my key didn't work. I remember that sound better than most birthdays. Metal into lock, turn, stop. I knocked. My father opened the door just wide enough to fill the frame. My suitcase was already behind him. I can still see it. Blue canvas, torn zipper pull, one wheel bent sideways. "What is this?" I asked. He didn't move. Then my mother appeared in the hallway. Vanessa stood 2 steps behind her in socks, arms folded, expression bright with the kind of interest people have when something bad is finally happening to someone else. Then my mother said it. "We all decided you don't live here anymore." I was 19 years old. No warning, no money, no second key, just a suitcase, a scholarship, and a family that wanted me out because culinary school embarrassed them. And Vanessa was tired of hearing my name at the dinner table. I didn't beg. That part still bothers my mother more than anything. I picked up the suitcase, walked to the bus stop, slept 2 nights in the student lounge, took extra dish shifts, finished school, cooked under chefs meaner than my father and smarter than everyone I grew up with, and learned the difference between humiliation and heat. Heat can build you. Humiliation just tells you what other people are. So no, I did not start on my own restaurant floor by giving my family the center table, because they had suddenly decided blood mattered again. "You can book like everyone else," I said. Vanessa laughed. "Please, half this city knows you came from us." I looked at her. "No, I came from despite you." The hostess stopped pretending to write. Two servers on the far side of the room had gone very still in that subtle restaurant way, where everyone keeps moving but the air shifts because they know a plate is about to break somewhere. My mother lowered her voice. "Don't be vulgar in your own dining room. Then don't turn it into your stage." Vanessa leaned over the stand and smiled at the hostess. "Put it on Camille's account." I said, "So try that again and I'll have you removed." That got my father's attention. He took one step forward, enough to make himself the man in the room, the same posture he used the night he put my suitcase by the door. "Removed?" he said. "From a restaurant that exists because this family made you strong?" I almost laughed. Exists because this family made you strong. Years of being locked out, mocked, erased, and rewritten, and now he wanted a royalty payment on my spine. "Leave," I said. My mother's smile disappeared first. Vanessa's disappeared second. Good. My maitre d', Julian, appeared beside me without being called. That was one reason I trusted him. He understood that good service wasn't only about comfort. Sometimes it was about clean removal. "Is there a problem, chef?" he asked. "No," I said. Just a group without a reservation." Vanessa's face went hard. Then she did exactly what I knew she would do. She performed. She turned to the room, spread one hand lightly, and said, loud enough for nearby tables, "Can you believe this? After everything family sacrificed for her?" There it was. Not accusation. Narrative. I kept my voice level. "Julian, walk them out." My mother actually gasped, but it was my father who leaned in and said, quiet enough to sound dangerous, "You are making a public mistake." I held his gaze. "No," I said. "I'm correcting an old one." Julian opened the door. Vanessa smiled again then, but it was a different smile, smaller, meaner, the kind she wore when she believed she'd already chosen the next weapon. As she stepped out, she said, "Fine. If we don't get a table, I will take our share another way." A week later, a certified lawsuit landed in my office. The envelope was thick, county filed, civil division. Julian brought it in on a silver tray because he thought it might be vendor paperwork and was apologizing before he even reached my desk. I signed for it, opened it standing up, and read the title once without fully understanding it. Then again. Claim for equitable family royalties and origin-based commercial participation. For a second, I honestly thought it was parody. Then I saw the plaintiffs, my parents, Vanessa, my aunt. I took it straight to my lawyer. Harper Sloan read the first page, then the second, then stopped cold on the verification sheet at the back. She lifted one page out of the stack, stared at the signature block, and asked in a voice I had never heard from her before, "Who signed this under oath?" Harper didn't answer her own question right away. She just kept staring at the last page, one hand holding the complaint flat against my desk like she was afraid it might somehow rearrange itself into something less insane if she looked away for even a second. Then she turned the verification sheet toward me. "Look at the affiant." I did. At the bottom of the filing, under penalty of perjury, attached to a declaration about the true origins of my restaurant, there was a signature block for Elise Moreau, my grandmother, my father's mother, the woman who taught me how to hold a knife properly when I was 12, how to salt a tomato before judging it, and how to tell the difference between hunger and appetite. She had also been dead for 3 years, and I looked at the page once, then again. Then I said, very quietly, "That's impossible." Harper nodded. "Yes." The declaration attached to her name was 6 pages long. According to the lawsuit, my grandmother had supposedly sworn that I did not create the restaurant concept alone, that the culinary identity behind my Michelin-starred business came from generational family knowledge, and that I had always been intended to operate as the public face of a family-driven hospitality brand. There was even language claiming my removal from the house at 19 had not been an expulsion at all, but a strategic independence arrangement meant to help me build grit before returning to the family fold. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes a lie gets so polished it tips over into madness. Or they rewrote getting thrown out as a leadership program, I said. Harper was already flipping pages. The complaint was worse the deeper it went. They weren't just asking for money. They were asking for a percentage of the restaurant's gross revenue going forward, a retroactive cut of past profits, and a declaratory finding that certain dishes, methods, and brand elements were derived from family intellectual contribution. My mother was claiming unpaid labor in my formative culinary years. My father was claiming seed support and logistical shelter. Vanessa was claiming strategic brand insight because, according to her filing, she had helped shape the discipline and standards that later became my restaurant culture. I looked at her name on the page and felt something hard settle in my chest. Vanessa had not shaped my standards. She had shaped my exit. That was different. "Keep going," Harper said. I did. Exhibit C was a typed summary of alleged family contributions. Exhibit D was my dead grandmother's declaration. Exhibit E was what they called the Moreau Legacy Recipe Schedule, a stapled packet trying to map my current menu to family dishes. That part almost impressed me in a sick way. They had actually tried. My duck juice had been linked to a Sunday roast my grandmother used to make in a chipped enamel pot. A fennel broth on my winter tasting menu had been described as structurally derived from a soup my mother used to overcook into gray water. My smoked pear dessert had been connected to a poached fruit plate my aunt once brought to Easter in a plastic container from the grocery store. It was fraud, yes, but it was fraud with garnish. Then Harper tapped the verification page again. "When exactly did your grandmother die?" "October 3rd, 3 years ago." She checked the declaration date. "Filed and sworn 8 months ago." I watched her eyes move to the notary line, then stop. "Oh, that's interesting," she said. "What?" She slid the page back to me and pointed. The notary stamp showed an active commission date. Too active. Commissioned 14 months after my grandmother died. Meaning, even if someone absurdly tried to argue this was an old statement notarized late, the commission timeline killed that too. "She could not have signed this," Harper said, "and this notary could not have witnessed her sign anything while she was alive." I felt cold all over again, not because I doubted my family anymore, because they had gone further than even I expected. They had dragged my dead grandmother into court to sue me. Harper reached for her phone and called the civil clerk's office directly. She identified herself, gave the case number, and asked a question in the tone lawyers use when they already know something is rotten and just need the clerk to confirm which part smells first. "Yes," she said. "I need the hearing status on the TRO request." She listened. My stomach dropped. "What?" I asked when she hung up. "They requested expedited review." "How fast?" "Monday morning." It was Thursday, 3 business days. My family had filed a lawsuit crazy enough to make a judge frown, but not so crazy that we could ignore it. That was the dangerous zone, not a joke, not yet fatal, and just enough paperwork to force me to spend the next 72 hours defending the right to own the life I built after they threw me out of theirs. I stood up too quickly and had to steady myself against the desk. "What can they actually do?" Harper answered immediately. "If we do nothing, create noise, pressure vendors, scare investors, frighten staff, potentially freeze distributions tied to the business if a judge thinks there's an emergency ownership dispute." I stared at her. My restaurant could get tied up because my family invented a royalty theory and forged a dead woman's signature? If the paperwork isn't destroyed fast enough, yes. That was the first moment I felt real fear, not for me, for service, for payroll, for reservations booked months out, for my sous chef who had a baby on the way, for Julian, or who still texted me photos of wine labels when he got excited, for the dish team who counted hours down to the minute because rent never cared whether a lawsuit was idiotic. Harper was already moving again. "We need 3 things today," she said. death certificate for your grandmother, original house records or anything showing you were removed, not strategically launched, and proof you built this restaurant without family capital. I have all of that. Good, then get it. I went to the wall safe in the office library and pulled what I never thought I would need for anything except private anger. The old locksmith invoice from the night I got locked out at 19, my student housing emergency form, tuition statements, early payroll records from my first kitchen jobs, the lease for the room I rented above a laundromat, odd in my original investment wire into the restaurant LLSE years later. When I came back to the desk, Harper had the complaint spread into piles. Forgery, recipe nonsense, revenue claim, family labor claim. Then she stopped at one more page. Her whole expression changed. "What now?" I asked. She lifted a supplemental exhibit I hadn't reached yet. It was a copy of a private restaurant operating memo. My operating memo, staff structure, wine cost controls, vendor margins, a draft expansion note I had only ever circulated to 3 people inside the company. I looked at it once and knew exactly what it meant. My family had not built this lawsuit alone. Someone inside my restaurant had fed them documents. Harper lowered the page and asked very quietly, "Who on your staff had access to this?" 4, I said. Harper looked up from the memo. "Only 4? Me, Julian, my director of operations, Leah, and Naomi in finance. Who else?" "No one." That was the truth. The document in her hand wasn't a menu draft or some pretty internal note that floated around the building. It was a restricted operating memo I had written for a possible second location. Labor structure, wine cost controls, vendor terms, projected margins, service philosophy, even private notes about what kind of investor I would and would not take. It was the kind of paper that could hurt me in court if the wrong person wrapped it in the right lie. Harper set it flat on the desk and pointed to the lower right corner. "Look here." At first I didn't see it. Then I leaned closer. A faint gray footer sat under the page number, so small it almost disappeared into the print. Exported via board draft/user, L. Kessler/internal copy Leah. Leah Kessler, my director of operations. The room went very still. Harper said, "When did you last circulate this?" "Never outside executive review." "And did Leah have reason to print it?" "No." That answer came too fast, because as soon as I said it, I knew something else. Leah had been the one who urged me not to overreact when my family showed up at the restaurant. She had called the scene emotionally messy, but manageable. She had also told me, 2 days later, that Vanessa had phoned the restaurant asking whether I seemed stressed and whether I was making impulsive financial decisions. At the time, I thought it was phishing. Now it looked like calibration. Harper picked up her phone. "Call Julian. Tell him to lock the admin office and pull door access logs for the last 2 weeks. Then call Naomi and tell her not to leave with anything. Not because she's accused of anything, because I want this room closed before panic spreads." I did both. Julian answered on the first ring. The second he heard my voice, his tone changed. "Something's wrong." "Yes," I said. "Lock the admin office. Right now. Then meet me there." Naomi was easier, shocked but steady. She promised not to touch a thing. Leah did not pick up, neither the first time nor the fourth. By the time Harper and I crossed the dining room into the back office hall, Julian already had the admin suite locked and the security terminal open. Naomi was inside by the filing cabinets, pale and silent, one hand still wrapped around her office badge. I showed them the footer on the memo. Julian swore under his breath. Naomi just said, "Nah, no." Harper stepped in before emotion could turn into noise. "I'm not accusing anyone without records," she said, "so let's get records." The restaurant's internal system tracked more than people realized. Not because I distrusted my team, but because restaurants bleed money through carelessness. Office doors, late-night entries, document exports, vendor edits, payroll access. Good systems leave tracks. Julian pulled the office access log first. Leah's badge had entered the executive office at 11:48 p.m. on Sunday. The restaurant had closed at 10:30. I had left at 10:40. Naomi frowned. Why was she here that late? I looked at the screen, then at the memo in Harper's hand. Because at 12:03 a.m., 15 minutes after Leah badged in, a board draft showed the restricted operating memo exported from her user account. At 12:07, another export. At 12:10, a PDF bundle created. At 12:12, a file sent to an external email address. Harper leaned closer. Can you open the transfer details? Julian clicked. Recipient vk.strategy.consulting at... He stopped reading. So did I. Vanessa Kessler used to joke in college that every smart woman should keep one email address for serious business and one for war. I had forgotten the exact wording, not the initials. VK, Julian said quietly. Harper nodded. Your sister. Naomi sat down without meaning to. I could hear the metal chair scrape under her. Then Julian opened the camera feed archive for that night. No sound, just the grainy office hallway at almost midnight. 11:48, Leah badging into the admin suite. 12:16, Leah exiting with her coat on and her phone in her hand. 12:17, she stopped in the side corridor by staff entrance. A woman stepped into frame from outside, cream coat, dark hair. Even in bad hallway footage, I knew my sister's posture better than my own. Vanessa. Julian whispered, she came here. Not to eat, not to celebrate, not to play family, to collect. Harper asked, can you zoom? Julian did. Leah handed Vanessa an envelope. Vanessa tucked it under her arm and touched Leah's elbow like they were old friends. Then both women disappeared out the side door. Naomi looked at me. I swear to God I didn't know. I know, I said, and I did. Naomi was many things. Nervous, detail-obsessed, too eager to apologize. And she was not someone who could sit through a forged lawsuit over my dead grandmother and keep her pulse under control. Harper was already moving again. Where is Leah now? Julian checked the schedule. She was supposed to be here at 4 for vendor review. It was 4:15. He called her. Straight to voicemail. Then the host's stand called the office line. Julian answered, listened, and went white. What? I said. He lowered the phone slowly. Leah just came in through the front, he said. She has 2 men with her, and she's telling the hostess she needs immediate access to the wine office because she's there to preserve family intellectual property before counsel arrives. By the time I got to the front, Leah was already past the host stand. Then she had one hand lifted in that managerial way she used when she wanted to sound reasonable while doing something outrageous. The 2 men behind her were carrying hard cases, black, square-edged, the kind people bring when they want a room to believe they belong in it. The dining room wasn't open yet, but staff meal was still finishing in the back. Glassware was being polished, and the whole front half of the restaurant had that dangerous pre-service quiet where any raised voice feels twice as loud. Leah saw me and didn't even flinch. Camille, she said, good, we need access to the wine office, recipe archive, and development binders before opposing counsel starts playing games with preservation. Opposing counsel, not your lawyer, not Harper, opposing counsel. My sister had gotten to her all the way, and the hostess looked at me like she was waiting for gravity to choose a direction. I stopped 6 feet from Leah and said, no. One of the men with the hard cases stepped forward. Ma'am, we're here to create a forensic image of materials subject to family origin claim and trade derivation review. Who hired you? I asked. He looked at Leah. That was enough. Harper came up beside me so quietly Leah didn't notice until she spoke. Before anyone touches a single drawer in this building, Harper said, I want to see the court order. Leah reached into her tote and handed over a stapled packet with all the confidence of someone who had spent the afternoon rehearsing a righteous version of betrayal. Harper read the first page, then the second. Then she smiled, a very small, very cold smile I had learned to trust. "This is not an order," she said. The man with the case frowned. "It's a preservation request." "Exactly," Harper said. "A request. Filed, not granted." Leah's voice sharpened. "The materials are at risk." "No," I said. "You are." That hit, not because I raised my voice, because I didn't. Leah turned to me with something close to disbelief. "Your family has a legal interest in the concept. If records disappear now, that becomes spoliation." Julian had drifted into the room behind us, not close enough to escalate, but close enough that every server suddenly remembered an urgent task within earshot. Harper flipped to the back of the packet. "And here," she said, "is the affidavit that supposedly justifies emergency preservation." She held it up. "Signed by Leah, under oath." I took the page from her. Leah Kessler had sworn that I was emotionally volatile, likely to destroy records tied to family ownership claims, and actively concealing the Moreau archive from rightful contributors. Moreau archive. There was no Moreau archive. There was a dead grandmother, a forged declaration, and a sister who had apparently found an employee willing to sell access in exchange for feeling important. I looked up from the page. "You signed this?" Leah tried for dignity and missed. "I signed what was true." Naomi, who had come down behind Julian without my noticing, made a sound like she'd been slapped. Harper asked the men with the hard cases, "Did either of you verify that a judge signed anything authorizing entry?" The first one hesitated. The second looked annoyed. "We were told counsel had priority access." "By whom?" Again, they looked at Leah. Good. I wanted everyone in the room to see the chain. Not rumor, not feeling, chain. Leah crossed her arms. "You can intimidate me later. Right now, we're preserving evidence." Harper took one step closer to her. "No," she said. "Right now, you're standing inside a Michelin-starred restaurant with 2 contractors, no signed court order, and an affidavit that may already be contaminated by a forged dead person declaration and stolen internal documents. So let's talk about evidence." Then she held up the operating memo, the one with the footer. "Did you export this?" Leah said nothing. Harper turned it around so everyone could see the lower corner. "Board draft, user L. Kessler, internal copy, exported 12:03 a.m. Sunday." Leah's face changed. Not much, but enough. Julian added from behind me, "And the hallway camera shows Vanessa meeting you at the side entrance 12 minutes later." That landed harder. One of the men with the hard cases actually took a half step back. He hadn't known he was walking into that. Leah looked at me then, and for the first time since she walked in, the managerial mask slipped. "You built this place out of family stories," she said. "You sell memory and call it authorship." That would have sounded profound to someone who didn't know her. To me, it sounded like Vanessa had been coaching her. "My grandmother taught me how to season food," I said. "That did not make my mother a shareholder." Leah opened her mouth to answer. Then Harper slid one more paper out of the preservation packet, and everything changed. It was a fee agreement, contingent advisory compensation, signed 3 days earlier, by Vanessa and by Leah. Under it, in plain language, Leah was promised a percentage of any recovered family participation value, plus a fixed role in operational transition if the restaurant came under supervised revenue allocation. Operational transition. She wasn't preserving evidence. She was buying herself a promotion through my sister's lawsuit. Harper held the page up. There it is. The whole room had gone silent now. Not awkward silent. Witness silent. Naomi whispered, "Oh my God." Leah's voice came out thin. "That's not what it sounds like." "No?" Harper asked. "Then explain why a current employee secretly exported executive materials to the plaintiff, signed an oath calling her employer unstable, and negotiated a paid role in the business she claims needs protection from its owner." Leah said nothing. And the first hard case man looked at the second and muttered, "We're leaving." Good for him. Not because he was moral, because he had finally located self-preservation. They turned and walked out without waiting for permission. Leah stayed where she was. Harper lowered the fee agreement and asked, very quietly, "Who drafted your affidavit?" Leah's eyes flicked once toward the packet in Harper's hand. That flicker told me everything. Not my mother, not my father. Vanessa. My sister always wrote like she was cross-examining the future. Harper saw it too. Thought so. Then Julian's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and handed it to me. An email had just hit the restaurant's public legal inbox from Vanessa. With subject line, "Final chance before filing criminal referral attached," was a letter threatening to report me for inheritance suppression and fraudulent use of deceased family intellectual property. It would have been absurd if not for the attachment beneath it. A scanned page from my grandmother's old recipe notebook. Except it wasn't just any page, it was one I had never seen before. At the bottom, beneath a handwritten sauce note in my grandmother's script, was a second line in different ink, cleaner and later, for Camille. When she opens her own place, this is hers. I stared at it, then at Harper. My throat tightened. That's real. Harper took the page, looked once, and said, "If that notebook is genuine, your sister just made the worst mistake of her life." Harper was already moving before I could ask why. "Forward me the full email with metadata," she said to Julian. "Right now. Not the attachment, the entire message." Julian nodded and ran for the office. Leah was still standing there, pale now, one hand gripping the strap of her tote so hard her knuckles had gone white. She looked less like an operator and more like someone realizing she had stepped into a fraud she did not understand deeply enough to survive. I barely saw her. I was staring at that notebook page. My grandmother's handwriting had a rhythm I knew better than some relatives' voices. She made her lowercase f's too tall, pressed hard on ingredient weights, crossed her sevens like she mistrusted numbers. The sauce note at the top was hers. I knew it in my bones, and the line at the bottom, for Camille, when she opens her own place, this is hers, was later ink, but still hers. In the older hand, slight tremor, same pressure pattern on the C. Harper looked at me once and said, "If Vanessa had any real claim, she would have attached this on day one, not in a last-minute threat email after the inside leak got exposed." What does that mean? It means she didn't know this line existed until now, or she didn't understand what it would do. Julian came back with his laptop open. Harper scanned the email headers so fast I could barely follow her eyes. Then she smiled again, smaller this time, sharper. "Sent from Vanessa's personal account," she said. "No lawyer copied, no formal filing, and the attachment source path is embedded." She turned the screen toward me. The scan had not come from some old family archive. It came from a phone scan created 41 minutes earlier, location tag still partially embedded, on the cemetery district. My stomach dropped. My grandmother's grave? Maybe not the grave, Harper said, but somewhere near where family storage was kept after her estate closed. That was when it hit me. After my grandmother died, my father cleared her house in one weekend. He said it was cleaner that way, efficient. I hadn't been allowed inside after the funeral luncheon because, according to my mother, I was too emotional around old objects. Vanessa and my father handled the boxes. My aunt took china. My mother took linens. I got one cast iron pan shipped to me 6 months later with no note. They had the notebook the whole time, or at least Vanessa did. Harper stood up straight. "Good. Then here's what we do." She called the civil clerk first, not to argue, to file. Emergency motion to strike the verification. An emergency motion for sanctions. Notice of fraudulent declaration attached to deceased affiant. Emergency request to deny any preservation or TRO relief based on contaminated evidence. Supplemental exhibit. metadata from Vanessa's threat email, and Leah's contingent fee agreement. Then she called opposing counsel, or rather, the lawyer whose name was printed on the complaint. He answered on the second ring. "This is Harper Sloan," she said. "I'm calling as a professional courtesy before I file something that is going to make your evening much worse. Your clients have a dead woman verifying a complaint, a current employee feeding them internal documents for compensation, and now the lead plaintiff has sent a direct threat email from a personal account attaching what appears to be authentic grandmother-written evidence that destroys the royalty theory." She listened. Then, "No, I'm not overstating anything. Check your email in 90 seconds. She hung up and turned to Leah. "You have one chance to make your life less terrible. Sit down and tell me exactly when Vanessa first approached you." Leah looked at me, not Harper, me. And finally, she understood that whatever image she had built of me as a talented cook, too emotional to defend the business, was gone. "It started 3 months ago," she said. Julian shut the office door. Leah talked, not gracefully, not nobly, but enough. Vanessa had come in as a guest after the Michelin announcement, asked for a tour, then found Leah alone by the wine office and told her she was the only adult in the room, said I was brilliant but sentimental, claimed the family had legal background rights in the concept and that smart people would make sure transition happened professionally when I inevitably collapsed under expansion pressure. She promised Leah a future title, a percentage, authority. The same bait Vanessa always used, not money first, importance. Leah admitted exporting the memo, admitted meeting Vanessa at the side door, admitted signing the affidavit because Vanessa told her the lawsuit would end in a revenue-sharing settlement and I would keep cooking anyway. Harper recorded every word. By 8 that night, we had filed enough to turn the Monday hearing from a threat into a trap. Monday morning, the courtroom was full. Not packed like a murder trial. Worse, quietly full. Restaurant people, 2 trade reporters, a vendor rep I recognized from produce, 1 woman from Michelin Regional who pretended not to know me. My family had chosen publicity when they walked into my dining room. They just hadn't understood who else might watch when the paperwork cracked. Vanessa sat in navy, chin lifted, as if posture could still save her. My mother wore pearl earrings and damage. My father looked furious in the tired way men do when they realize confidence has started billing by the hour. Their lawyer rose first and tried to frame it as a complex family origin dispute involving culinary lineage. Harper stood second and burned it to the floor. Not theatrically, procedurally. Death certificate for my grandmother. Commission dates for the notary. My grandmother's death occurring 3 years before the verification was supposedly sworn. Leah's export footer. Hallway footage of Vanessa collecting the envelope. Leah's contingent fee agreement. Vanessa's direct threat email. Metadata showing the notebook page was scanned personally. Off counsel path. Less than an hour after Leah's exposure. Then Harper introduced the notebook page itself. My grandmother's note. For Camille. When she opens her own place, this is hers. The judge read that line twice, then looked over the bench at my family and asked the only question that mattered. If the family collectively owned this business identity, why does the decedent appear to have singled out the defendant by name? No one answered well. Vanessa tried first, claimed it was sentimental, not legal. Harper replied, exactly, sentimental. Our personal, directed, the opposite of a shared commercial entitlement. Then came the worst moment for them. The judge asked about the verification page. Opposing counsel, to his credit, had the sense not to defend the dead woman's signature once the dates were in the room. He said he had relied on representations from his clients. That probably saved his license. My family had no such shield. The judge struck the complaint's verification, denied the TRO outright, referred the matter for sanctions review, and ordered immediate preservation of all communications between the plaintiffs and current or former employees of my restaurant. She also used the phrase prima facie fraud on the court. I will never forget that phrase. Not because it was dramatic, because it was clean. Years earlier, they had told me I didn't live at home anymore. Or now a judge was telling them they didn't get to live inside my success either. After the hearing, Vanessa tried to get to me in the hallway. "You think this is over?" I looked at her, really looked at her. She had spent my whole life converting humiliation into structure, locks into consensus, theft into administration, jealousy into strategic concern. "Yes," I said, "for you, it is." By the end of that week, Leah resigned before I could fire her. Good. It spared me the meeting, not the paperwork. Opposing counsel withdrew. Trade reporters got enough of the sanctions filing to understand the shape of the story without me saying a word, and the dining room stayed full. That Friday, I ran service. Not because I had to prove something, because that is what ownership looks like when it is real. At the pass, between courses, Julian set a small wrapped object beside my plating towels. "What's this?" Naomi found it in the legal packet box after court. I opened it later in my office, my grandmother's original recipe notebook. Vanessa must have panicked and surrendered the real thing to counsel after sending the scanned page, hoping it would make her look cooperative before anyone forced production. Inside, tucked between broth notes and pastry margins, was one more line in my grandmother's hand on the inside cover. The one who is fed is not always the one who inherits. Sometimes it is the one who learns. I sat there for a long time with that notebook open in my hands and the dinner rush building on the other side of the wall. Then I got up and went back to work. And in the months that followed, the sanctions hearing went exactly the way Harper predicted. My family's complaint was dismissed with prejudice. The court ordered them to pay a painful share of my legal fees and made unusually direct written findings about false verification, bad faith revenue claims, and employee contamination. Leah's affidavit didn't survive either. Her promised operational transition turned into unemployment and a reputation no serious hospitality group would touch. Vanessa took the hardest fall, not because she went to prison in some cinematic blaze. She didn't, but because the record followed her. Searchable sanctions, fraudulent declarations, direct evidence tampering attempts. For someone who built her whole life on posture, that kind of paper damage was fatal enough. My mother did what she always did, rewrote the story socially until she ran out of people willing to hear it. And my father stopped calling entirely. That was probably the first honest thing he had done in years. As for the restaurant, nothing froze. Payroll ran, vendors stayed. The Michelin people did not pull away. If anything, the staff got tighter. Julian became even more protective of the floor. Naomi stopped apologizing before every sentence, and I created a smaller, cleaner executive access structure, because trust is beautiful, right up until it needs logs. I still have my grandmother's notebook, not in the kitchen, in my office, because it was never really about recipes. It was about permission. My family thought blood entitled them to the harvest. My grandmother, in the end, left her answer in ink. The thing belonged to the one who learned. If you made it this far, tell me in the comments, what would you have done when your own family walked into your restaurant and tried to bill your life back to you? Would you have settled quietly or taken it all the way to sanctions? And which moment hit you harder, the lawsuit, the dead grandmother's signature, or the notebook line with Camille's name? If you like the story, leave a like, subscribe, and stay with me for the next one.